Donald Trump meets a young Air Force lieutenant. His shocking truth shakes the nation. A single envelope arrived at the White House, just one among thousands. It wasn't from a senator, not from a general, not from a powerful lobbyist. It was from 29-year-old Air Force Lieutenant, a name no one in Washington had ever heard before. At first, President Donald Trump barely glanced at it, but then he read the first line. "Mr. President, I have something important to say. Not for myself, but for those who can no longer speak." Something about those words made him pause. Young officers don't write directly to the president, they don't ask for private meetings unless they have something the world isn't supposed to. Here, Trump looked up at his advisors. Who is this? Gabriel Hayes. And what the hell does he know? What started as a simple letter was about to shake the nation to its core. Gabriel Hayes had faced danger before he had been trained for it. Combat zones, high-pressure missions, life or death decisions. Those were the battles she understood, but this was different. He stepped off the military transport jet at Joint Base Andrews, his uniform crisp, but his hands clenched into fists. The air was thick with tension. Though no one had said a word to him, he could feel the weight. Telephone scene eyes watching, assessing, waiting. No press had been notified of his arrival yet. Somehow the whispers had begun. Soldiers passing by stole quick glances at him. A few officers murmured to one another as they saw him approach the waiting black SUV. Gabriel ignored them. He had spent years learning how to tune out distractions, but deep down he knew this wasn't something he could simply push aside. As the vehicle pulled away, his mind replayed the decision that had led him here. The letter, the risks. The choice to break the silence. He wasn't here to make friends, he wasn't here to see revenge. He was here for the truth. The SUV moved swiftly through the streets of Washington, weaving through traffic as the White House loomed ahead. By the time they reached the gates, his pulse had settled into a steady rhythm, not out of fear, but out of focus. A Marine opened the door for him. Lieutenant Hayes, right. This way he was escorted through the halls, past security checkpoints, past portraits of leaders who had shaped the country's history. Finally, he was led into a waiting room, just outside the Oval Office. A man in a sharp suit stood near the door. Arms crossed, his gaze was unreadable, but the scrutiny was clear. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, his voice even but firm before. "You go in there, I need to make one thing clear." Gabriel met his gaze without hesitation. "You are stepping into the most powerful room in the world. Every word you say, every move you make, it will be remembered. If you're here to make accusations, you better have something stronger than theories." Gabriel didn't blink. "I have the truth." The man studied him for another moment, then finally nodded and stepped aside. The door opened, and Gabriel Hayes stepped into the room that could change everything. President Donald Trump stood near his desk, hands in his pockets. Watching as Gabriel entered, the room was grand yet intimate, a place where decisions that shaped the world were made. Gabriel had never cared for politics. He had spent his life following orders, trusting in the system. But now, standing before the commander-in-chief, he realized something that made his stomach turn. He wasn't sure if he could trust anyone anymore. Trump gestured to the chair in front of him. "Have a seat." Lieutenant Gabriel sat, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. He'd faced ranking officers before, but this was different. Trump studied him for a moment before speaking again. "Your letter caught my attention." He leaned forward slightly, "not because of what you asked, but because of how you asked. You didn't come to complain, you didn't beg for justice, you simply said, 'I've something to say.'" Gabriel held his gaze. "Yes, sir." Trump tapped his fingers on the desk. "So tell me, what is it that's so important?" Gabriel took a slow breath. He had played this conversation over in his mind 1,000 times. He had imagined every possible outcome. But now, as he sat across from the most powerful man in the country, he knew there was no rehearsed speech that could do this. Justice. He had to speak the truth. "3 years ago, I led a mission." He began, his voice steady. "A classified operation overseas. On paper, it was supposed to be routine, but something went wrong." Trump's expression didn't change, but Gabriel could tell he was listening carefully. "My best friend, Captain Ryan Carter, trusted my call, and he died because of it." The words came out flat, controlled, but inside the weight of the crushed him for 3 years I carried, that I believed it was my fault. I told myself I should have made a different decision. Gabriel swallowed hard. "But I was wrong." Trump narrowed his eyes slightly. Wrong how Gabriel's hands tightened into fists here. It was the moment of no return. The mission wasn't a mistake, it was a setup. He said we were sent in with bad intelligence, the higher-ups knew the risks, and they sent us in anyway. For the first time, Trump's expression